Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Mathyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Value 15, Nityam Samachitatvam, constant equanimity. It measures how quickly the mind backs up one's narrow vision. What is a narrow vision? It means initial reaction. What is an initial reaction? It means when the present state of mind is contained within a narrow vision mindset. Therefore, it only draws from a little bit of information that it has on the basis of what is immediately found in front of me. So therefore, how quickly the mind then gets backed up by its friend, its best friend, which is the buddhi. And its best friend is the one that broadens its vision, its initially narrow scope of sight. Therefore, it brings in more possibilities of how to look at this that is initially causing us to have this reaction of what, right? So how quickly can we recover after we feel that initial emotional, it pulls us, it just wants to suck us in. So how quickly we recover from that? That is value 15, Nityam Samachitatvam. Concrete example. Suppose that you get confronted and it is an unpleasant confrontation, or someone criticizes you or condemns you. And this will probably happen to all of us throughout our lives since we have many more years to live. Now, there is several ways of what happens in that initial what. So let's cover the what and then how we can back up by the so what. The first way by which we respond to that initial criticism of our work, of our character, of something about that is personal to us is anger. Now, anger has two orders, because now we need to talk about, are you talking about Ishwara's order anger, or are we talking about the personal anger which comes forth from personal projections? So what is Ishwara's order, quote, anger? Even though it's kind of inappropriate to call it anger, Ishwara's order, but we'll just say it, Ishwara's order responds to the present situation. Suppose that someone is outright twisting dharma in front of you. Someone's preaching anti-dharma in front of the kids, and you walk in, right? Now, how are you going to feel? You're going to say, oh, what are you going to, how are you going to feel about that? And the kids are just kind of like listening. Okay, so let's be kamikaze killers, let's kind of, use each other and so on. How are you going to feel about that? Is it going to be pleasant? Likely not. So that initial unpleasant, distasteful feeling is what I call by Ishwara's order initial anger. That means you quickly stand up for what you know is right. Therefore, you respond, right? You do what is right. Or your family gets abused by someone, and then you just walk in and you see that happening. Are you going to respond? You're going to quickly go over there and take control of the situation. So this is what I mean by Ishwara's order, that initial sense of anger, even though it's probably inappropriate to call it anger, but a sense of doing what needs to be done because something is clearly being violated that shouldn't be violated right now. The second type of anger is the personal projected anger. This is whereby we carry certain standards about what should happen right now, how you should behave towards me, and what you should say to me in this particular scenario, and what should happen right now. So therefore, you carry a certain standard in respect to yourself and what you know from the past. If someone violates that standard, then we get what we call angry. And this anger is a personal version, a projected anger onto something, because that something is not behaving according to my expectations. They're not speaking according to how I would otherwise prefer being spoken to. Therefore, we then lash out of anger, but it's actually our own stuff. Therefore, we need to be careful and to discern, is this Ishwara's order anger, which is highly rare, unless you find yourself in these extreme situations. But most of the cases, this anger comes from these having a standard of what should happen. Therefore, I respond on the basis of that alone. Misbehaving kid, right? And then a kid doesn't listen. If the parent doesn't have several methods other than resorting to anger, thus shouting, then what's going to be the consequence of that? The hurt child is going to probably bear that scar later on. So that's one example how even parents can fall into this anger where the kids are not complying according to my standards. Therefore, the first thing as a parent that I do is I go and raise my voice. And then slowly, it starts to get more and more increase. And she was really shouting. I could hear in the entire park. So it's just one of those examples how sometimes we project our own anger even onto our own kids. So now the question of whether that was morally right or wrong, I don't know enough information about it. But the point is, one should ideally keep that as a last resort and choose other means of getting across their message to the kids. Because it often leaves scars, and the kids, when they grow up, it means generally I'm not loved because I did something wrong. So that's the first way, how we interpret when we're being condemned or criticized. The second is by being defensive. So what happens is we stand up for ourselves to save face. That means we just say, no, this is what I say, this is how it is, and therefore I'm going to remain defensive. So the first one is anger. The second is defensiveness. The third one is hurt. Some of us, we go into our own personal shell. So when we get criticized or condemned, then we retreat, we go quiet. Anger, defensiveness, hurt. The fourth one is denial. This is whereby the person blocks information. Even though the information is coming through, they literally intentionally block it. Not intentionally, but sometimes even unconsciously gets blocked. And this mechanism initially is useful, especially for children, because they do not know any better. They cannot interpret it. Therefore, they have to put it underneath they just have to kind of close their eyes and pretend it's not there. But this carries over for most adults into adult life because it becomes a habit since we've been doing it since child. And then what we end up doing is when we hear something that is a feedback that we could learn from, then we go into this denial mode. So we shut down and we say, no, I don't care. This is your stuff, right? You're projecting onto me. But what the person is actually doing is unwilling to accept or consider what is being received. Therefore, they could potentially change a few things about their perceptions. For example, I don't care. That's a common one. I don't care. So we just push it off away like that, or whatever. These two phrases, I don't care, whatever. These are common examples of, not always, but of this denial kicking in. How about protests? The protests, even the health officials are providing us information, right? Who have a lot more data than the common citizen does. But the person having no alternative to resorts to the fourth one, that is denial. So despite the health official information saying, wear your mask and, make sure it doesn't spread, the person gets into denial and they say, no, it doesn't exist. The virus doesn't exist, or, they're lying to us. They want to control us. So this is, again, the coping mechanism in this aspect of denial. And we can see this throughout the society, all these four methods. So that was the what method of 4 ways of how we handle a confrontation, whether from the government, whether from a close one or a friend, or in the future, whenever it is, one of these 4. So we have to be alert and ask ourselves, which way could this be? Is this anger? Is this denial? Is this, am I blocking information? Am I going to my little personal shell? What am I doing right now? So we need to be very alert as to what we're doing. The so what is where the buddhi comes to the rescue, and then it refuses to take it personally. Now, the reason is for several reasons. Obviously, you cannot just say, I don't care, because if you just brush it off as I don't care, and you don't know where you're coming from when you say I don't care, then it's probably one of these 4 options that we have to look into. So why would you not want to eternalize something that is possibly a inappropriate comment by someone else? Why would you not want to internalize that or to take it personally? There's several reasons. The first one is it's most likely it belongs to them, right? It's their stuff. It's their interpretation about you. Maybe you remind them of some person in the past, and therefore it's a trigger, so you're that. That could be a possibility. I'm just saying it's not absolutely, but it could be. Another one is Suppose it's an inappropriate remark. This person who said that is just 1 out of a billion, or actually 7 billion or 8 billion now. So why take it so personally? One mind with a few notions out of 7, 8 billion. And then to put all of our efforts into that one mind, is it really worth it? Then you need to assess that. So if we forget these numbers, these bigger picture, which is what the Buddhi does, then we start to fall into this pattern of what, and then we literally get caught up and enmeshed. Or how about the fact that even if you get involved with someone trying to, kind of correct the inappropriate remark, keep in mind this: 200,000 new babies are being born every day around the world. So we think we're making a big difference. Like, let me show you, how it's not true. Let me show you. What you don't realize, in these 24 hours, you got 200,000 new people born on Earth. Just one day. So think about this. Is it really worth it to try to internalize a comment that otherwise we would perceive as hurtful or inappropriate, something that would just really get to us personally, right? So go through this mind like, wait a minute, this is just one comment, one mind in one little time, in an aspect of eternity of time. Why am I internalizing this? The other aspect to so what involves asking, what could this, or where could this person be coming from? What would they have to believe in order to think this about me or my system or my teaching? What would they have to believe? What kind of a background would they have to come from in order for them to conclude this particular comment about this? So this gets your buddhi involved rather than in the aspect of judging and saying, well, they obviously don't know what they're talking about. So it's rather get curious about the person.
I have one question. What is wrong in being defensive while in a confrontation? So when I have a certain opinion and there's a confrontation and I'm being defensive about my opinion, what is wrong in being defensive?
Suppose someone disagrees with what you're saying, then if you really have checked up the facts, right? If you really know your speciality, then it's not really a question of being defensive. It's just a question of asking, well, what do you mean by that? And then talking factually, like communicating factually, like let's stick with the facts. But defensive means is that it hurts you because this notion I have taken such a long time to integrate, it's very personal to me. And now someone's threatening the authenticity of this notion that I'm holding. So therefore the person gets defensive. They get, no, I'm hurt and let me show you how it is. Like, let me teach you a lesson. So there's a subtle difference. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. The first one is being factual, like, okay, you may have a point. The other one is, oh, this is like so close to me, this teaching, this idol, this avatar, or whoever, you're close to, and then someone challenges that and you're like, whoa, I don't feel good about that. And so we don't respond factually, we respond emotionally. So we go back into this defensive mode.
I feel and think that being defensive is a natural response of our buddhi. Even when I'm taking these Vedanta classes and I have a set pattern of thoughts, which is being conditioned, so far. And whenever I get a new point of view or new teaching, my intellect first tries to, save my own conditioning. Mm. But by being exposing continuously to the Vedanta teachings and contemplating and thinking about it, my defense mechanism, it falls. It gets destroyed. And once it gets destroyed and then the new teaching starts sinking in. So I was just saying that what is wrong in being defensive when it's just a natural way of protecting ourselves?
Yeah, it's a valid question because I see that your definition of defensiveness is actually in a positive light. It's more like this is new information and there's that initial skepticism and now I have to reconcile my old notions with what I'm hearing right now. So there's this, initial kind of, whoa, this is new for me. In your case, it would be, no, Andre, that's wrong. Because I'm holding this old view that I've heard 5 years ago, and this is how it is. So in other words, I wouldn't be able to get to you. There will be no conversation that could be possible between us, because you would just put a block in front of me and that will be it, right? Because you will be too holding on to the old notion. But you just now showed to us that you're receiving this new information that is being expounded in the class, and then you're, through your own reflection, reconciling your old thinking and this new thinking. Now that involves your own free will and your own efforts. So in my language, the defensive wouldn't really account to this kind of behavior. So defensive is just not willing to buy any of this, and then you just literally close yourself off.
Being in denial mode.
Yeah, the defensive denial, very similar, very close, related.
Okay, the other example, my own observation was, whenever I at work, when I'm doing the quality review, and I'm being someone says that I have not done something correctly, and they're attacking my work, and then I get defensive. I tell them, okay, these are the facts, and this is what I have followed, and because of that, this is what the other person is saying is not true. So that's also defense, because someone else is attacking me on my work. So is being defensive again, kind of negative connotation word? Because I think it's positive in these two situations.
Yeah, it's a good example. Sure, there would be a sense of, hey, I've taken the time through my own knowledge, through my own skills to create this report, and now it's not being received. Now, obviously, it's going to get challenged, right? Because they don't really, someone may not see the value of how much work you've put in the background. So obviously, in that case, you would respond on the basis of their specific objection. So they will maybe bring up objection in pertaining to that report. And then you ask them, well, what specifically is the objection? What don't you agree with? And then they would mention that. And then you would counter that from your standpoint, but still being open to their feedback. If you don't get open to their feedback, then we cannot call that, then that's called denial or being defensive. But if you do have a conversation and you are still open potentially while still protecting your work, right, and plus hearing their opinion, that cannot be denial or defensiveness. So defensive, again, to be clear, is whereby I stand up for my work and I'm unwilling to receive anything from your side, no matter what you say, because I'm so attached to my work, then that's it, right, with a period. Value 16 is ananya-bhakti, which is unswerving devotion. First of all, what is the cause of lack of devotion? And what does it look like to have lack of devotion? It looks like the person is very logical. So if you ask, what would a person who lacks devotion look like? Just general characteristics. They will be highly logical, like highly rational in everything, right? Everything has to make sense perfectly. There's no question of faith, no question of higher. If you cannot prove it, that's it, right? So it's kind of like you're dealing with this high intellect mode, doubtful and a skeptic. Everything has to make perfect logical sense. So what is the consequence of lack of devotion? One of them, again, is denial. What do I mean by this? One of them is not ready to see things factually, just as we're having a conversation now with Mina. That means they're not ready to receive a fact about a report, for example, right? A feedback. So therefore, they're still highly invested in personal opinion. Right? It's my way or the highway, basically. Now, there's two realities I want to talk about. One of them is pratibhasika, and the other one is vyavaharika. Pratibhasika in Vedanta means a jiva's own personal, self-created, conditioned reality, pratibhasika. And vyavaharika is the objective reality, which all human beings collectively agree upon to be the objective reality. So if we look at, assuming our eyes are open, and we look at the sun, everyone's going to say that's the sun. No one's going to say that's the cloud. They will only say that's the cloud if they actually see something that represents the cloud. If you see a tree, you're going to say that's a tree. Now, never mind what kind of a tree, oak tree, whatever kind of tree, you're still going to say that's a tree. When pratibhasika overwhelms the vyavaharika, then even if someone looks at the tree, what they're actually saying or seeing is money. They're seeing, for example, okay, so the tree is growing apples, but what I'm really seeing is money, right? I can sell these apples and I can, make money out of them. So therefore, the environment becomes a source of income instead of the environment. In fact, this is what causes, this massive sense of deforestation, whereby the entire forest is seen as nothing but a means to resources exploitation. This is called pratibhasika on a collective level, whereby it overrides the vyavaharika. God provides us the world, greenery, the weather, but only to the person's self-interest, pratibhasika, notions. We then override that with those pratibhasika notions. Therefore, the person literally is living in their own little world. So what is lack of devotion, consequence, denial? And some of the causes of this denial could be a lack of tapas. Last week, we spoke about spiritual practices, lack of spiritual practices, too much accustomed to likes and dislikes. That means the likes and dislikes just means pratibhasika, personal notions. In other words, they have to precede what I see in front of me. I always have to put my own spin to get joy out of what is. What is the vyavaharika. But the person says, no, it looks very beautiful. And therefore, they derive pleasure from their own self-created value superimposition onto something that inherently doesn't have that very value. That is vyavaharika, objective, God-created world. The other reason for this denial could be habit orientation. Habit orientation is whereby we've thought for a long time a certain way, and that way has now become ingrained in the brain. So it becomes almost normal to think like that. Therefore, the person receives information about divinity, and they say, what divinity? What is this? What is this Advaita, non-duality you're talking about? This is all rubbish, right? Because the person is established in the old ways of thinking. Therefore, it's normal to just reject. There's no question of, it looks on the surface like they know where they stand, but it's actually not that. It's just that the person's been thinking in such a long time that there's a natural rejection about whatever new information comes up. For example, Mina demonstrated to us when we're saying something in class, she thinks about it and then she tries to resolve it in response to her existing experience. Consequences of denial in reference to spirituality. Common one, projection, as I just said. Gurus are frauds. So common. Let's write a book, right? The fraud system of the gurus. Something is affecting us deeply. And we ask, what's wrong? We say, nothing's wrong. Right? Something is affecting us deeply, and yet we're denying it, so we say, nothing's wrong. I mean, just to respond, nothing's wrong. Just that gives away that something's wrong. Just the tone gives it away. So this is, again, denial. So how do we reintroduce devotion into our lives? First step, we need to convert this or minimize this pratibhasika to get back into vyavaharika. One still has to look into their own notions and therefore diffuse them and let this objective world take over. Let this world of objectivity just be known as it is. And how do we do that? We minimize the amount of words that we have to use to describe things. Because often when we describe, like a protest or some person or this or that, we tend to insert a lot of adjectives. And these adjectives are actually just giveaways of our patterns in our mind. So we minimize the amount of adjectives and we just stick with the event. Like there was a protest instead of there was a protest, a bunch of morons, right? Or something like that. So just take out these adjectives. The other method is to learn to meditate. Highly important, because meditation causes our mind to become more sensitive. How can a mind be devotional if all it sees is the grass? For example, in the Mahabharata, there was a scene where Dronacharya was educating his students, and he asked Arjuna, look up into the tree and what do you see? And all of the students kind of said different things. I see the feather, I see a bird, I see leaves, I see different things. But then Dronacharya, who's the archery teacher of Arjuna, asked Arjuna, he was young at that time, what do you see? And Arjuna, I think he was holding his bow and arrow, ready to strike the poor bird right in the right eye. What do you see, Arjuna? I see the bird's right eye. Out of all of the distractions, Arjuna focuses on one single thing. And Arjuna was highly devotional. So what does this represent? His mind is very sensitive. So learn to meditate, because the meditation makes the mind as focused as Arjuna's. It's able to stay with one thing and therefore see the depth of that one thing. Okay, value 17, Vivikta Desha, Sevitvam, preference for solitude.
Vivikta Desha Sevita is love for a quiet place, for seclusion. Desa is place. Vivikta means separate or solitary. And Sevitva is to inhabit or resort to. So Vivikta Desha Sevitva is a value for resorting to a secluded place. Why should love for spending time in a solitary place be listed as a value? It is not the isolation of the place that makes the value, but what is valuable is the kind of mind that is happy in such place. A mind that is quiet and appreciates solitude is a mind that has a love for being with itself. This is a beautiful attitude that is not found very often in our society. We are a society of people bent on escaping from ourselves. We try to escape because we are not satisfied with ourselves. We see ourselves as not being the way we would like to be. Therefore, we keep the mind busy so there is no time, place, or quiet in which we can be with ourselves. Even on the telephone, if there must be a waiting period, music will often be provided so the mind can be occupied. We travel from beach to mountain, sand to snow, and back again to escape from ourselves. Wanderlust is a good expression for this urge to travel. For the stay-at-home, amusement parks, movies, television, sporting events, magazines, newspapers, parties become the means for escape. It is not that there is anything wrong with travel or recreation. The problem is the need for escape. For some, the avenue of escape may be drugs or gambling or drinking. Whether harmful or seemingly benign, the need to escape betrays reluctance on one's part to face oneself.
You can tell that activities have become an escape for you when without the activity you feel lost, sad, or incomplete. The occupation that leaves you feeling incomplete when you cannot have it has become an escape. A given activity by itself is neither an escape nor a non-escape. It is the reason behind the activity that makes it an escape or not. A happy person will sing because he has nothing else to do. That is not escape. But the escaping person also will sing because there is something he cannot face, and singing occupies his mind, so he does not have to look at it. Singing or listening to music can be either an escape or a non-escape. When people become agitated, if they can sing, you will find they will begin whistling. Humming or singing because they want to shake off certain thoughts. In fact, what they want to shake off is themselves, their reactions to an unwelcome thought. They think of some sad event or some mistake they have committed, then immediately a whistle will start or a song will come out. This is not the song of a happy person, but the song of escape.
This tendency of the mind to want to escape is a universal thing. Everywhere in the world, the human mind is the same. Whether Indian, American, or European, the basic tendencies in minds will be the same. Cultural differences are found only in the response to these basic universal tendencies. From culture to culture, the avenues of escape will be different, determined by the nature of the society in which one finds oneself. Social factors will determine the way of escape, but the desire of the mind to escape is a universal thing. A person who enjoys being with himself in quietude is not a sad person. He is a simple, quiet, contemplative person. To be contemplative means to be able to face yourself happily. If you cannot face yourself happily, the mind will always require an escape. An escape is an occupation that engages the attention of the mind so that it does not have to be with itself.
For the one who wants self-knowledge, it is very important to have a value for being with oneself for quietude. Lord Krishna mentions this value, Vivikta Desha Svevata, more than once in his counsel to Arjuna. In chapter 6, verse 10 of the Gita, talking about meditation, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, the yogin should dwell constantly on the self, established in solitude alone.
Common man settles for two modes of coping with a turbulent mind. And what's a turbulent mind? It means a mind that's unwilling to confront what is going on right now in my head, in my mind specifically. The first mode is togetherness. This is whereby the individual is constantly involved, engaged with something or someone. It doesn't have to be a person. Today, it's not a person so much as we would otherwise say 20 years ago. Today, it could be a phone, it could be surfing the web, it could be anything that is a video game. The moment the person meditates, sits down, closes their eyes to have some time to themselves, what's the first thing that comes to meditation? Who or what should I get involved with next? Let's plan my involvements. Meditation becomes an organizing in silence. Should I get a very good plan? Okay, got it. I should hang around with these people now. Togetherness. Someone breaks up, get a dog. Not even having time to reflect upon what happened. Just get a little puppy and then, continue your old style. Not really reflecting upon what happened. So these are all indicators how this mode of togetherness expresses throughout the society, right? Unwilling to confront what's going on in the mind, so just get distracted, supposedly distracted, sometimes not always distracted, but distracted by something or someone. The other extreme or mode is aloneness. This is where the person creates a private world. They surround themselves with gadgets, joysticks, computer games, 4 monitors, right? Like a cockpit, a personal cockpit. It could be a personal world of toys. Right? The person wins $1 million. Not all of them, but I see some cases like first thing, start buying toys, motorcycles, although Suzuki 650cc, that will be a different story though, right? Right. So start surrounding oneself with toys. That means a private world. Why? Because it's very easy to ignore one's own personal notions, personal stuff, chatter, just by surrounding oneself. Problem solved. Superficial in nature. Both of them are superficial in nature. But what do they both have in common? Unwilling to look at my stuff. Lifetimes upon lifetimes. It's got to come in one life or the other. That means the more we hold it off, the more the pressure keeps on rising. So knowing these two modes, we'll ask the question now, what is Vivikta Desha Sevitvam? Neither of these above, neither one extreme or the other extreme that I just described, but rather restricting strict time to yourself, not even with your beloved. Because your beloved, the presence of your beloved nearby in a meditation room, for example, it still gives you some kind of an association to them. Therefore, you cannot help but to have thoughts about them. This is just how human nature is. It has to be exclusively, and that's why I say strictly uppercase your time to yourself, not even a dog around you. And during this time, what do? It's exclusively for undoing these old patterns in our minds, not for, personal entertainment. This is, again, one of those two extremes. Question is then, why should I, the jiva, the relative time-bound jiva, work upon myself when the jiva is bound to these 5-fold limitations that we spoke about? Like, why should I work on this jiva when this jiva is one day closer to the grave? Because self-knowledge which is the purpose of this entire course, self-knowledge needs a self-knowledge friendly mind. Simple as that. A friendly mind. It doesn't reject the self-knowledge and creates its own pratibhasika notions. So this means that self-growth doesn't contradict liberation as long as self-growth is in the name of liberation. The moment you take out liberation away, self-growth becomes just one more life of improving this person who is standing on an ignorant foundation, no different than many lives before, many lifetimes before, beginningless lifetimes before. So how is one more life of improvement going to help? It's not. Therefore, self-growth has to always be combined with self-knowledge. When I say self-growth, I'm talking about the relative jiva, the jiva that is subject to those five-fold limitations. Self-knowledge is pertaining to I, the subject. Once these patterns are undone, then what's the result? A peaceful mind. Who wants the peaceful, still, focused, concentrated mind? We all do. And what are some of the benefits of a still mind? Well, let's take the most obvious. What is everyone looking in this world for? Satisfaction, no doubt. But how can a mind that is turbulent sustain the satisfaction when before it gets to enjoy it, a new thought pops up, therefore sabotaging the length of its satisfaction? So what is one of the benefits of a still mind? The delights and the pleasures which you're able to enjoy, that gets extended and increased, because the still template of the mind is able to hold that pleasant thought that is producing that delight right now. But if that mind keeps on adding its own pratibhasika notions, then whatever's on that template, it quickly gets replaced by a new thought. Some past memory or something in the environment disturbs it, triggers it from some other memory. Dog barks and then you got bitten by a dog 10 years ago. Now a dog barks and now it takes away your happiness that you're having right now. Association. So the pleasures and the extension of those pleasures that we're able to feel, experience while alive, they get extended for a still mind. Isn't it ironic though? What are we trying to do to gain pleasures, to gain delights in life? We're trying to change the amount of things that we have going on, which is symbolic of what? An erratic mind, right? It wants something else, something else, something else. In other words, it's a self-defeating action because the mind cannot sustain anything. So therefore, what do? I need something else. And then the mind sustains for 5 minutes, gone. Okay, something else. Therefore, it is a self-defeating, almost like a rat race to keep on chasing for something else. So what's the solution? We need to go back to the source, take care of this template onto which all of the experiences are, relative experiences are present. The second benefit is we're able to enjoy the ordinary. Nothing special. It doesn't have to be special. Do you notice how kids are happy? You have to do something to make kids unhappy. When it comes to adults, we have to do something to make adults happy. The reversal happens there. Why is this? Because kids are not carrying years and years of notions that are overriding this objective Vyavaharika reality. So where does the kid's happiness come from? From not overriding what is. That's what Vedanta is teaching us. Curing these notions that are always sabotaging our capacity to enjoy our delights that are going on right now. So what's the benefit of a peaceful mind? You don't need something huge to make you happy. Maybe just a leaf falling is enough. This is a common trait in all jnanis, in all prophets. They don't need a lot, right? Just happy with whatever's around. The other benefit is you're able to guide others. And in your guiding others, you straighten out your own thinking. It's not like you're guiding others to straighten your thinking, but just in that process, your thinking gets straightened. Okay, so conclusion of Vivekta Desha Sevitvam is it ends up being an accurate indicator of your commitment to self-knowledge. So how committed you are to self-knowledge is directly proportional to how much you admire this solitude, or at least a large part of your life is, it has a solitude aspect to it. The less I admire the Lord, the self, the more I want to distract myself, create a noisy world around me, have the TV going on, even though no one's watching, right? Always something's going on. Some sensory data is coming in. And no, the person does not find quietness awkward. Only a mind that is not used to quietness will find quietness awkward. Not even music, because music still triggers a certain memory, right? It still triggers emotions. Therefore, it still disrupts your clean slate of the template of the mind, even though music can, in certain cases, help you to concentrate, but also have this, when to switch it off. Now, what about a householder, as most of us are? How does a householder manage this? Suppose another householder in your house does not really value silence. How do you manage this? Well, we need to verbalize clearly. I found silence, or however you verbalize in your own language, I find silence important to me. Therefore, we need to say out clearly what we're doing, because if you go into a room and they suddenly go, do they love me, right? It's just going to create a disturbance in their mind now. So we need to be open. Otherwise, our beloved may feel neglected. So we need to verbalize our intentions when it comes to having a private space. Now, assuming a jijnatsu or a spiritual seeker goes through all of these values so far, 1 to 17, there's 3 more values. What does it look like? What is the progress of a person who went through all of these values? Suppose they went through them successfully. What would their journey look like? And we can plot their journey into 4 stages. And these stages are revealing because they show us where we are. So what is the first stage before these values even come to our life? What does this look like in stage 1? We start out complaining, projecting onto the world. Something's wrong over there. We become experts at creating opinions about out there, because the world is giving us dissatisfaction, giving this mind dissatisfaction, because the notions in this mind are not aligned with the world. Therefore, the world ends up being an agitation to this mind. So stage 1, we start out complaining, blaming. Easy, right? So there's nothing wrong or right about it. It's just recognize this is the progress of an individual. This is probably a stage of youngsters, but also this sometimes passes into the adulthood, right? In different aspects, one way or the other. Stage 2, from this complaining mode, we begin to self-reflect. We begin to say things like, what is my responsibility in this situation right now? What role do I have in what is going on right now? So stage 2 is you're starting to become responsible. Recognize that you are also part of the society, therefore you play a role. Not just a bystander. Stage 1, bystander, right? Oh, okay, wow, this is going on. Stage 2, you act with a little bit of control and power that you do have within your sphere of influence. Now, most people in spirituality think that it stops at stage 2, because stage 2 goes like this. Okay, so I have thought it through. I have reflected what I need to do. I have acted within my sphere of influence. What more can you ask than that? Most stop at stage 2, but there's 2 more stages. Stage 3. After having gone through stage 2, which is a stage of self-reflection, looking into your responses in relation to what's going on, evaluating your responses, you go back into the world. Into that world that in stage 1 was initially giving us dissatisfaction, we go back into that very world. As how? As a satisfied human being. Because we have aligned our mind's thoughts with the world. Therefore, we don't find it to be a dissatisfactory producing component anymore. Therefore, we go back into the world and we're able to enjoy the world now. Stage 4, you are so comfortable with yourself, with the world, with God, with nature, with reality, owing to your own clarity, a lot of work because of this, so comfortable that you become a source of inspiration for others. Last stage. It is risky because if you go and become inspiration for others, you may get challenged. Now, if the mind's not strong enough, then you may get discouraged. But it's the last stage. Coaches, mentors, even politicians, right? You think it's easy being a premier of Melbourne or prime minister of India? You're literally up there in front of the entire country. Think about the strength of the character to be up there, to willing to expose oneself, to risk oneself, to take on the criticism of the entire nation. That requires some serious character. Now, yes, stage 4 can also get disrupted a little bit because you always have this, I'm up there in front for personal reasons or some, distorted notions. So it's kind of like a politician that's not entirely in the favor of the entire nation, but rather in the favor of a certain agenda. That could also be a possibility. But these 4 stages. Stage 1, complaining. It's them. It's over there. They're frauds. They're scammers, right? So constant opinions and forums and YouTube comments, always something to say. Stage 2, the person just stops that because they see the fruitlessness of doing so. It's like, I'm just one more person giving an opinion amongst many thousands. How will I make any difference? Why do the same thing? The person actually says, how can I contribute in a positive way, in a positive light, in accordance to my unique skills? So the person takes responsibility. Literally, they say, if I was the parent in this environment, what would I do right now? And then you act. Maybe you say something, maybe you advise someone instead of just being a bystander. Stage 3, so comfortable with the world or decently comfortable that now the world that was initially giving us dissatisfaction, causing us to blame it, now we're able to enjoy it. And then stage 4, the person has gone through more work upon themselves to the point where they helplessly want to now engage in this work of being inspiration for others. So it's a journey that we go through. 4 stages of life. Revision of the values. Let's start from value 12, Anudarshanam, reflecting on the 5-fold limitations. Value 13, Asaktihi, absence of sense of ownership. Value 14, Anabhishwangaha, absence of obsession over wife, son, house, husband. Value 15, Nityam Samachittatvam, constant equanimity. Value 16, Ananya-bhakti, unswerving devotion to the Lord. Value 17, Vivikta desha sevitvam, preference for solitude. Value 18 will be Aratihi jana samsadi, absence of craving for social interactions.
This is not a value that calls for hatred of company. Company is not bad. It is not that one should dislike being around people. If the people are there, fine. Be happy in their presence. But know that you do not require the people to be happy. Love of quietude, in which one is happily with oneself and not longing companion values. They complement each other. It is not that a quiet place in and of itself is intrinsically something good, or that the presence of company is something bad, but the values are for a happy, non-escaping mind that loves being with itself. Such a mind is happy with itself in quietude and does not run after to escape, neither revels in nor hates company. These are two beautiful attitudes. With these values, I will never need to seek escape from being with myself, nor will I be disturbed either by the presence or absence of people. I will have composure, whether I am with people or without them. It is important to see the basis of these attitudes. To see through the values to the value underneath them is not a value for avoiding people, nor is vivikta desha sevatva a value for seeking quietude because one cannot stand people. Someone who seeks seclusion out of hatred of people is not expressing these values. Such a person is afraid of people, and fear of people is not a desirable thing in life. Equally, the other extreme, courting the company of people all the time to escape from oneself, is not any more desirable than the fear of people.
The attitude that is proper is not hatred of people, but a simple love of quietude, because I love to be with myself and therefore do not court company. This attitude establishes the right frame for a contemplative mind, for a mind given to inquiry, vichara. Inquiry here means inquiry into the basic, profound questions about myself. Who am I? What is this creation? Who is God? What is the relationship between God, the creation, and me? Inquiry into these subtle questions requires special sensitivity of the mind, sensitivity beyond what is needed to inquire into the functioning or description of tangible object or processes. Inquiry into something tangible, how to make bread, or even the grammar of a language is aided by having changing objects to see, to watch. One can see the modifications, vikara, taking place upon things, whether in a pan of dough or upon the stems of nouns and verbs. However, when the vichara is inquiry into the self, we are dealing with something that, although fundamental, is not tangible. The self is not a tangible object that lends itself to trial and error methods, checked by gross perceptions. The knowledge of the self must be seen as a whole. To appreciate the knowledge of the self, to see the self for the non-objectifiable wholeness that it is, requires a mind that is contemplative and sensitive. However, the sensitivity does not imply getting hurt at every turn, but it should be backed by healthy attitude and objectivity. Values come when I thoroughly understand my relationship to people, places, and things around me. In a factual understanding, those situations, attitudes, or events which I consider hurtful lose their significance for me and thereby their sting. Pride and pretense, which quote hurt, drop away from me. Non-harmfulness and accommodation, which soften hurt, becomes natural for me.
Lovely. What are the two extremes when it comes to social relationships? Again, we'll start to two extremes that are unhealthy. The first one is whereby the social friendship becomes a source of contentment or self-expression. Quite often today, one feels only expressive or extra expressive when they're in the presence of another person or in the presence of a group of people. Something like within them alivens, they're able to come up, they're able to become alive. Now today, this kind of extreme, whereby the dependency is there for one's self-expression, isn't necessarily when it comes to physical, even though it can be physical, but also common is to create a YouTube channel and then put this extravagant, flamboyant personality when one is in front of a camera. Right? And then it becomes about subscribers. Let me get more subscribers. That's one of the things today. Or socializing via Facebook, instant messengers, WhatsApp. Video games, huge, epic games by Fortnite, billion-dollar company, very popular. So video games today are the replacement for social interactions. Surfing the web, of course, looking at the news, going to forums, right? Leaving some comment about someone or something, like various comments here and there. All of this is engagement with out there. And all of these methods become a source of escapism, of not wanting to confront what's going on right now, right here, right? This noisy mind with chatter, too painful, too much to handle when I'm in the presence of silence. So then just turn up the TV, turn this, turn that, just get distracted. So social, this interaction becomes a means to temporarily subside the unresolved chatter in the mind. And on the surface, it's like a mind is brilliant, right? When it's out there, it's like, wow, they're amazing, right? They're brilliant. But that mind, you don't know. When it's alone, we don't know what goes on there. So it's very easy to be fooled by like brilliance, like out there, so flamboyant, right? So alive and bubbly. But I want to see that mind when it's completely still with itself, no one around, because that really indicates the maturity of one's growth. The second extreme is having discomfort in a form of fear and anxiety in meeting people. Right? So I don't want to meet people because I'm fearful. Why am I fearful? Because the person is unwilling to confront one's own stuff. Again, same thing as first one. So there's a sense of smallness. And out of that sense of smallness, the person knows not what they can contribute to the social setting. Therefore, it becomes about unwillingness to be out there, because I do not know my strengths nor weaknesses. The relative person still remains a mystery, which reveals haven't taken the time to look into this relative person. So one extreme out there for the sake of not dealing with the internal chatter. The other extreme in here, right? For the sake of not willing to look into one's own stuff, right? So they don't want to go out there because they do not know the strength of this person. Is it not true if you feel confident, you know where you stand in relation to your particular skill set, you have no problems going out there, meeting anyone, anytime, any place. Absolutely. So it's only when we don't know where we stand that we are doubtful or skeptical as to when we're called out, we say no. But there's a reason behind that. Even in the case of being with people, the person still may feel lonely. So therefore, they're unable to have a meaningful conversation with another person, because inside there's this unresolved chatter, like I'm not good enough, and I don't know what I can contribute here. I don't know where I stand. I don't know what my strengths or weaknesses are. So it reveals the person hasn't looked into their relative jiva. Knowing these two extremes, what is aratihi jana samsadi, absence for craving of social interactions? It is simply minimizing the exposure to the company which does not share your core values in respect to your highest purpose in life. I say minimize because the book says avoid, right? But realistically, can you avoid anything as long as we're alive? No. So there's no question of avoiding anything. So that's why I say minimizing the exposure to company, which that company means just a social setting, which does not share your core values in relation to the highest goal in life, at least according to your knowledge of what the highest goal in life is. Why is this important? Because in the early stages, when I say early stages, I mean in the first 5 to 10 years of our knowledge acquisition, this is called Shravanam, and including Mananam also, we remain highly fragile because our knowledge is still not firm. Now, if we go with that fragile sense of knowledge that we have taken so long to establish, and we go out there with others who are also not quite sure what is reality about, then what do we get fed? We get fed convincing opposing notions. And in one moment, they can demolish our own hard effort, our own faith and encouragement that we have been getting throughout this entire time. So we're not saying now, completely have denial mode, right? Block yourself up. Sure, receive the opinions. They may have something of value. But resist this temptation to completely get demolished by someone else's convincing opinion. Because I need to counter. You need to say, okay, well, you need to provide your feedback. But since we don't know, since we're still in the early stages of knowledge, then we have no choice but to subtly get convinced that they're more right. And therefore, we start to doubt ourselves. We say, okay, so the system that I've been learning is not so good. There's more out there. So we need to be careful and protect ourselves from these convincing notions that are very convincing in nature. You go have a debate against a Sankhya philosophy or Vishishtadvaita, phenomenal arguments, or Nyaya, logic, Purva Mimamsa, Jainism. All of them have in themselves a philosophical system that has solid notions. Now, if the person doesn't know philosophy, then they can easily buy into these other notions. So one of the good suggestions is take a philosophy course. I actually recommended one to Robert, which is Indian, what's it called, Robert?
Introduction to Indian Philosophy.
Yeah, Introduction to Indian Philosophy. So it really outlines the major schools of Indian philosophy, and it lists out where each notion in the spiritual field belongs. So next time, you're able to actually go, so this belongs to Buddhism. And you know what branch of Buddhism? So this belongs to Jainism. This belongs to the yoga system. This belongs to Sankhya. This belongs to Dvaita, Vishishtadvaita. Right? So you know exactly what belongs where. That way, you're not thrown off. So that's why the first thing I ask when someone challenges me is I say, what school are you coming from? Because the person may not even know what school they picked up this notion from, right? And they're just kind of like projecting it and say, now here's how it is. Is it from yoga? Is it from Purva Mimamsa? Right? Uttara Mimamsa, another name from Advaita. Is it Dvaita? Right? But Ramanujan? By who is it for? Like, where is it from? I need to know. And do you have a teacher? Who's your teacher? I want to know. If you don't have a teacher, well, then it's probably projecting onto the guru, onto the systems. So it's okay to say, yeah, you're studying Vedanta, but it becomes actually a mistake or a risk when you start talking about Brahman. That belongs strictly in class environment. So if you want to say, yes, you're studying Vedanta, then you stick with universal values, the Vyavaharika, something that everyone can agree upon. Or what is the Vedanta about? Instead of saying, it's about how you're at one with everything, and there's no difference between you and the Lord. It's like, okay, no, stop. So talk about something that's interesting, like the particles, how this intelligence is holding everything together. And it's similar to physics or science, captures the attention. Oh, I want to see that. Talks about values, what purifies the mind, what keeps the mind healthy and clean. Something that we can all relate to. But when it comes to these sensitive Sanskrit words, that is only strictly within the class environment. Now, if you're extroverted, right, and you go, wait a minute, absence for craving for social interaction, and yet my nature is an extrovert. I love to be with people. Is it saying now convert yourself into an introvert? Absolutely not. It's just saying, if you have a nature, an occupation, dealing with people, and it's your nature to be out there, like you have some title in a position, like a doctor or a physician or a mentor, or it's just normal to be around people. All you're doing is you're changing the nature of your conversations. You're making interactions more meaningful, more deliberate. That means you're holding the frame as to what the conversation will be about instead of just letting it slip in any way, left or right. That's all you're doing. And how can we make our conversations more meaningful? I suppose the next time, maybe some years, from now on, you find yourself back at your profession with the colleagues. Did I say years from now, months from now, weeks from now, right? With your colleagues, and you're just there, right? You're finding yourself with these people. Keep in mind these 4 communication models. Why should we keep this in mind? Because if we're able to do so, then we're able to come out of the models that don't serve us. In Sanskrit, the first model is called Jalpa. Jalpa. This means chatter mode. This basically means killing time. right? Let's just kill time together. We're waiting for the bus station, the train, just talking about random stuff. No intention to getting to know the person, just literally unconscious, non-deliberate chatter. The second one is vitanda, argument mode. So while the person's saying something or someone's saying something, in the background while listening, what's the intention? How can I refute this? How can I disprove this? All right. So no interest of considering the other person's perspective, but rather being identified with the ahamkara. I'm just waiting for you to finish so that I can show you how my system is way better than your logic. In fact, you being my opponent become my source of inspiration. You know why? Because the other person provides keywords, and then we use their keywords to create new objections. So we have to be careful. You have to detect this. Is this a vitanda conversation right now, right? Is this going anywhere? Are we both kind of like trying to preserve the status of our particular view? Vada. Vada is constructive speech. So we're saying coherently what we want to say, coherent and direct, right? Just say it sincerely as you mean it. Don't hold back. Don't try to say, okay, let me hope they catch in between the lines. See, that too has its place sometimes, but there has to be a balance between implying things and expecting them to get between the lines and also saying it directly. At the same time, while we are saying what we want to say, you're keeping in mind this person also has a series of experiences that are worthwhile listening to. If you keep that in mind, then we don't fall into the trap of saying, okay, so I'm right, I'm better, right? Any of that right or wrong thing. So keep in mind, no matter who this person is, whatever school they come from, they too, like you, went through a series of experiences in life. And they are worthy of at least giving them the freedom to respond back in the light of their experience. So we're giving our opinion, but at the same time, when you stop, then you give them space or the freedom to give their opinion. If you find yourself interrupting, then just, pause. So, because sometimes we want to just kind of like, oh, wait, actually, just pause. It's okay. We may do it 2 or 3 times at the beginning, just pause and then let them finish. If they're unable to articulate what they want to say, then if appropriate, you may intervene. Because sometimes the person's trying to portray a concept and you're clearly feeling they're struggling to do so. So if appropriate, you can intercept. That is only something that you can know in your unique situation. It's not like, absolutely wait for them 5 minutes and they say nothing. It's like, you're just kind of waiting. No, just let them finish. And they're like, yeah, okay, I'm waiting for you. Just help them out, right? So there's always that dynamic. It's never black or white. One of the extremes here in giving the opportunity to share is if someone says, for example, I've been feeling very fatigued recently. So what's the extreme here? We say, oh, really? I've been being fatigued and sick. In other words, we kind of amplify it instead of providing some reassurance, instead of relating to what they're saying. What do? We make it about ourselves. I've been feeling sick. Oh, me too. Okay, that also has its place. But one option better is to say, oh, really? And then ask a little bit about that, right? Just get a little bit interested about what they really mean, right? Reassure them. The fourth model is samvada. Samvada. This is informative discourse, whereby you're going to an objective specialist in their field. They've taken the time to research in their particular field. They're good at it because they have a lot more time than I do. Therefore, they're a researcher. They know their field very well. They're called a specialist. And we learn from that specialist. So we're capitalizing on someone else's time in research to learn ourselves, which the information that we get from them is the same information you would have gotten if you were to research yourself, if you had the time that they have. So this is where teachers come along, the teachers throughout the society, school teachers, mentors, coaches, physicians, any kind of educators, aviation experts, any sort of a specialist. One of the extremes in this area is whereby the spiritual seeker comes and says, starts asking questions to the teacher about something they've heard in the past. They're trying to put the present knowledge into their past notions. That's one of the extremes. So instead of doing that, rather ask question pertaining to what is being said right now. Instead of going, well, actually, I heard, something else 5 years ago, and I want to fit that and this new teaching so they can kind of reconcile. They may reconcile, but sometimes there's a contradiction. So you need to point that out. You need to bring that up rather than asking, hoping to get an answer to make your previous notion stronger. Suppose your ability, or you have a talent in a certain area, you work with clients, suppose, and we probably will in the future. Sometimes the client, with a notion of their own, will try to impose their idea. Now, remember, in that moment, you're the expert. You're the one that takes the time to research. So in that moment, we need to resist falling into the framework of the one that is posing a question that is on the basis of a false notion. Same thing happens in journalism. A journalist sits down. A journalist has certain biased view about the situation. And then you sit down with the journalist. And then the journalist slowly starts to suck you in using their questions. And what do? We fall into their framework of knowledge. So suppose now you can even do a little improvising scene after class. Suppose you get called by a journalist and they say, hey, come over, I want to interview you. And you say, absolutely. Before doing that, what you do is you say this. Before I answer the question, I'm going to make sure, take the moment to reflect on where that question could be coming from. If you do not understand the question, then you ask the interviewer, what do you mean by that word, right? What do you mean by that? Because we often fall for this trap. We think that the one that asking the question was supposed to reply. But the one that's asking the question also is asking from a limited standpoint, from a limited scope of knowledge. So it's not true that you're supposed to answer the question that is being spoken, but sometimes we need to ask, wait, let's define the words in your question so that we're both on the same page. If they're unable to define the words, then you need to define the words so that the interview or the conversation is relying on your framework. So someone needs to set up the framework of definition onto which the conversation takes place. Therefore, be not sucked into someone else's questions, which may or may not be based on incomplete data. It is your job to even question the questioner. Finally, what is a summary of aratihi jana samsadi, absence of craving for social interaction? We need to reassess our reasons for being with people. That's it, just reassess. Am I with people to derive joy from it? Or am I with people to learn? The people that I'm around with, do they cause me to doubt myself? Or they challenge me in a constructive way? That's why I say it's not about avoidance, but rather being more deliberate about who you are conversing with, who you choose to be around with. At work, there's a break and everyone's talking. Still need to be deliberate, right? You just want to kind of fit in and talk with everyone, pick up random notions, chatter here and there, and then carry that back home, or be a little bit more filtery, right? You're filtering what is coming into your mind. Therefore, being deliberate. No, I choose not to listen to this right now. And as the book said, because you love being with your own still mind. Now, what's a sannyasi's, and then we'll close, interpretation of aratihi jana samsadi? The sannyasi is so committed to self-knowledge. The desire to know God is so overwhelming that they naturally just distance themselves away from what's going on out there. Less news, less this, less that. Just you cannot help yourself. All you want to know is the reality, the truth. Know thyself, as Jesus beautifully put. That's a Mahavakya of its own. Know thyself. The desire is so overwhelming that it's not about being out there or being with myself. That's not even a question. It is just keep the head down. learn, contemplate, reflect, self-inquire, consecrate all the efforts into knowing thyself. That's a sannyasi's view. Reason for aratihi jana samsadi. Okay, let's revise the values. Value 16, ananya-bhakti, devotion to the Lord, unswerving, that is. Value 17, vivikta desha sevitvam, preference for solitude. And value 18, aratihi jana samsadi, absence for craving for social interactions. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.